All right, welcome to Basics of Biblical Hebrew, Chapter 18. This will be Qal Imperative. But first we'll start off with a Hebrew insight. Then we'll look at the workbook, see if there's any questions. We'll go over the translations. We'll look at the Qal Imperative, and we'll go over the vocabulary. That's what's on the agenda for this evening. And so for the insight, we have Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, a very famous verse, a very popular verse. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean or support yourself, not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths, or he will direct your paths. The word I want to look at is acknowledge. I can acknowledge a number of things. A lot of people can acknowledge a number of things. I can acknowledge that my manager may have wanted me to do my job a certain way, even though I felt that there might be a better or more efficient way. But if I can acknowledge that he can tell me how he wants it done, or we can acknowledge things politically, like who's president or who was president or any president in the past. We can acknowledge a lot of things, and that doesn't. It just seems to me that acknowledging is not a very strong word. When we look at it in Hebrew, we have in all the ways of you. It's ways plural because that yod is there. All the ways of you, and that's second masculine singular pronominal suffix. And all the ways of you know him. There's a pronominal suffix on this imperative. This is an imperative, and it has a pronominal suffix. So this whole word here, da'ehu is know him, So in all the ways of you know him, and he will make straight the ways or the paths of you. So in all your ways know him. And I think that is a good advice. I like that better. But as we're going through life, we have things come to us and we have to make a decision. I think it's very good for us to seek to know him in it. Things that are hard. Why is there this death in the family or whatever? Well, we don't always know why, but I think that the Lord's desire for us would be that we would use whatever it is we're going through to draw near to him. In all our ways, we should seek to know him. But that's an imperative being a command. In all your ways, know him, and he will make straight the paths of you. And that is why we learn Hebrew, because you don't get that from the acknowledge. That's pretty common in a lot of translations. We wouldn't even know that that's an imperative to know him. So, all right. Any questions on the workbook for chapter 17? That was on Vav consecutive. We actually have two sections when it comes, two sections. We have the imperfects and the perfects. Okay, well then let's go ahead and look at the translations. First one on page 69, this is for the imperfects. And with the imperfects, the Vav consecutives are really, really easy to see. When you see that initial Vav and you have a patak or even a comets. I don't know if there's any on this page. Comets. I don't see any. Looks like they're all pataks on this page. But when you see that, you know it's going to be a Vav consecutive. So starting with number 1, which comes from Genesis 12:10, and he was. Well, we probably say and it was, or and it was. There's no it in Hebrew. It's he. And he was famine in the land, and he went down. Abram, Egypt word. I say Egypt word because that comma's hey at the end, unaccented, is the directional hey to. So you could just say to Egypt. So vayehi on the first one, that's the haya, to be verb, and it's imperfect. We have that initial yod there. That's the yod preformative, and Vav consecutive. So things are going along here, and so the next thing that happened, and he was a famine in the land, and the next thing that happened, and he went down. So those are the two Vav consecutives. Number 2 comes from Exodus 2:24. Vayishma, and he heard. And God is the subject. We have verb, subject, order here. So, and God heard the groaning of them, and he remembered, God remembered the covenant of him with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. So the first verb is Vav consecutive, and he heard. The next one is after the parenthetical phrase there, they're groaning. Vayis kor, that's also a Vav consecutive on an imperfect. Number 3, in Genesis 2:22, starts off with a Vav consecutive. Fact is, that's pretty common for a clause to start off with a Vav consecutive. So let's see, number 3, Genesis 2:22, and he built. And here again, we have good Hebrew word order, verb subject, Yahweh. And Yahweh built, Yahweh God built with the rib or the side, which he took from the man to a woman or for a woman. That's what he built, was the woman. So we have one Vav consecutive on the first word there. Number 4, taken from Joshua 24:29, and it was, just like what we had in the first number 1, and it was after the words, or we probably would want to use things. That's oftentimes things. It uses the bar for things. So, and it was after the things, these. So after these things, and he died. There's another Vav consecutive. Joshua, son of Nun, the servant of Yahweh, a son of 110 years. That's often how they tell you how old somebody was. Not always, but quite regularly, probably most of the time, it'll say that somebody was a son of so many years. That's an idiom, a Hebrew idiom. You don't see translations saying that because most translations fix the idioms. But that's a pretty common one. So we have 2 Vav consecutives in number 4, the first word, and then, and he died, Vayamat. Vayamat. Number 5, from Exodus 1:8, starts off again with a Vav consecutive, and he arose, a king, a new one, over Egypt, who not he knew Joseph. So only one Vav consecutive on an imperfect. That's the first word. Number 6, Vayavo, and he entered Moses. So again, good Hebrew word order. We got the verb, then the subject. Moses entered in the midst of the cloud, and he went up to the mountain, and he was, there's another Vav consecutive, Moses was on the mountain 40 day and 40 night. And of course, that's just typical way of Hebrew saying it. In English, we'd say 40 days and 40 nights. We'd make it plural. So we have 3 Vav consecutives. The first word, Vayavo, and he entered. And then we have, and he went up, Vaya'al. And then we have, and he was, again, same, like we've seen a couple other times. Number 4, number 1, Vayahi. Okay. Any questions on those? All right, we'll move on to page 71. And now we're looking at 69 is what we did. 69 was the first one that we did. That's the imperfects. Now we're ready to do 71, which is the perfects with Vav consecutives. Now, the thing that we're going to notice is that Vav consecutives with the perfects, that's usually going to be the first word of a clause. And so we're going to notice that some have more than one clause, but if not, that's the only one, the only place we'll find it for some of these. But it also has a shva. You have to go by the context to know, look at it and say, okay, this is actually a Vav consecutive. Because every one of them, if you just look down through here, well, some have a hirik for different reasons. When you add stuff, vowels change. Mm-hmm. So let's just go with number 1, Deuteronomy 27:8. And you will write. Notice that the ta at the end, that's the subformative. Katav is the word for writing. And ta at the end is second masculine singular. And that's the subformative, so that's a perfect. And the vav has a shva, but we will translate it, and you will write on the stones all the words of the law, this one, or just this law, all the words of. I say words of, see that Sarah Yod at the end of divrei, that's um, words of the law, this law. Number 2, Ezekiel 36:28. And you will dwell in the land, that one. So in that land, I'm sorry, in the land that, let's try that again. And you will dwell in the land that I gave to the fathers of you all, and you all will be for me, for a people, and I will be for you all, for God. And so we have 2 Vav consecutives on the first word, and then you all will be. We don't have any accent marks here, but I'm sure we're going to have an accented break after to the fathers of you all. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words in. And then the 6th word, vi yitem. The tem is the you all, subformative on the haya, and you all will be for me, for a people. Notice the anochi and I. It's not necessary to have it because yea, I will be contains I in it. It doesn't need it. So there's some emphasis there. And I will be, or I myself will be for you all, for God. Number 3 from Exodus 36:26. Ezekiel 36:26. And I will give to you all a heart, a new one, and a spirit, a new one, and I will give in the midst of you all. Oh, a new one I will give in the midst of you all, and a spirit, a new one I will give in the midst of you all. Okay. And the only Vav consecutive is the very first word. It's Natan, and the second noon has dropped out, and we have the Dagesh and the Tav and the subformative, the first person common singular subformative. Number 4 from Deuteronomy 11:1. And you will love Yahweh, God of you, and you will keep or you will guard the responsibility or the duties or the charge. It's the thing to be kept of him. Okay, so it's his duty or his charge, and statutes of him, and the judgments of him, or it could be and ordinances of him, and commandments of him all the days. So, and you will love, and a Vav consecutive on a perfect. And then we have Vishamar Ta. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words in. You will keep, or you will guard. Number 5 from Genesis 9:15. And I will remember. There's our Vav consecutive. That's the only one. I will remember the covenant of me, which we're going to have to supply a to be verb probably, which is between me and between you all, and between all, but since it's nefesh kaya, since that's singular, I'm going to go with every instead for the kol. I'm going to say between every living soul in all in all flesh, and not he will be again the waters or flood. Okay, and then number 6 from Genesis 17:8. We start off with a Vav consecutive, and I will give. That's like we saw up on number 3. And I will give to you and to the seed of you after you, land of the place of your sojourning, or the place of the sojournings of you, all the land of Canaan, or Canaan, for a possession of forever, and I will be for them for God. And that last 3 words from the end, that's also got the Vav consecutive. It's new clause, and that starts off clause, and I will be for them for God, or for God. Okay, any questions? All right. So looking at the call imperative. Now, the imperative is a conjugation, and we're still talking about calls. The call stem. Call is going to be simple, um, active action. All right. And so we've looked at the perfect, that's completed action. We've looked at the imperfect, which is incomplete action. And we've looked at the imperative. Now we're looking at the imperative. So we have three conjugations yet to go: infinitive construct, infinitive absolute, and participle. And then we'll start looking at other verb stems, the derived stems. But the things we learn in the call that will apply to all these others when we get to them. So today we want to look at basic understanding of the call imperative conjugation. We want to learn the forms of the call imperative, to learn how to say do not in Hebrew, learn how to say please in Hebrew, and to learn to translate imperatives. So first off, we want to look at understanding the call imperative. What does it mean? Imperative is called a volitional. Volitional equals the will, the will. There are three volitional kind of statements in Hebrew. One is the imperative. That's what we're studying today. One's the cohortative, and the other is the adjective. The imperative is only second person, only ever second person. The cohortative, that's what we're studying today. The cohortative is always first person, and the adjective is always third person. But the first and third person ones, the cohortative and adjective, we will be looking at those in chapter 23, not today, but all of these are considered volitional. The imperative is the only one that's considered a conjugation. These other two are not considered conjugations, because basically the cohortative and the adjective still look like the imperfect. By and large, in fact, the adjective always looks like the imperfect. You just have to go by context. Cohortative, it mostly looks like the imperfect. Sometimes you'll end up with a hey at the end of a word. That would be the cohortative form, but it still looks like an imperfect with a hey at the end. But like I say, that's in chapter 23. That's just a preview. So in other words, volitional expresses commands, wishes, or desires. That can also include, like in prayers, whenever you're asking the Lord to do something, you might use an imperative. This is true also for Greek. It doesn't mean you're commanding God what to do, but it's the type of form that's used to make a request of that kind. So next, we want to learn the forms of the call imperative. It's actually pretty easy. Imperatives and other volitional forms, which like I said, the cohortative and the adjective, they're based on the imperfect paradigms. And we already know the imperfect paradigm. We studied that in chapter 15. We've gone over it ever since then. And so we don't need to go over it right now. We're going to chop it down, though. Imperatives usually express commands. They only occur in the second person. And it's the most common of the volitionals, more common than cohortatives and adjectives. So what we're looking at is only in the second person. So it's based off of the imperfect conjugation, the imperfect paradigm, and it's only in second person. So here's our imperfect paradigm, but we can cut a whole bunch of that out, because all we need is the second masculine singular, second feminine singular, second masculine plural, second feminine plural. That's all we're going to be looking at today, are those. Okay, so here's the imperfect forms of those four, second person, masculine, feminine, singular, plural. Okay, just four. And the imperative, you remove the preformative. So the form stays the same, but you remove the preformative. Second person forms are without preformatives. So we take that off. And so instead of tol, we now have katol. Katol is the imperative. And instead of being you will kill, like it says the side, it just means you kill, talking to a man. This is masculine. You kill. When it comes to feminine, we're going to remove the preformative. Now we got a problem. We have a schwa fight. We can't have a vocal schwa for the first one, and the second one is normally the vocal. You can't have two vocal schwas in a row. And so when that happens, usually the schwa becomes a heuric. And so now we have keep Lee, all right? And so instead of you will kill to a woman, telling a woman to kill, it's going to be or I'm not saying you will kill it now, it becomes you kill. You're giving a command to a woman to kill. All right, so going down to the second masculine, we can remove the preformatives. And again, we have another schwa fight. And again, it's going to turn into a heric. So it becomes kitlu. So that's second masculine plural. You're talking to at least two guys or more. And instead of saying you will kill with the preformative, it just becomes you kill or you all kill. And then for second feminine plural, it'll be you all kill. For a woman, first we're going to remove the preformative, and it just means you all, speaking to two or more women, you kill. And that's all you have to know about the forms. We're going to look at variations on that. Sometimes you can have a comet's hey at the end. Here's katol, which is tiktol would be you will kill. Okay. And so the rest of this is all the same. We just remove the preformative. And so there's a second masculine singular with the tav on it, but we can have the imperative, can have a comet's hey on the back of it. It becomes a second person masculine singular imperative. When you add something to it, Hebrew generally compensates some way or another. When you add something to it, it can affect the vowels as well. If something goes away, it'll affect the vowels too. So in this case, we have kotla, because that initial comets is a comet's hatuf. That's an O vowel, and which means it's a short vowel. O vowel, kot, that means this is a silent schwa, kotla. So that's the Qal imperative, second masculine singular. Now, kotla looks a little bit like katala, which is the third feminine singular. But this comets is the long A vowel, and this metheg here tells us this is the long A vowel. And since this is the long vowel, this is a vocal schwa, katala. So just going through these, katala, kotla. They're actually pronounced differently. They look similarly, but when you pronounce it, say it out loud, you can tell the difference. Because the difference is whether it's an A vowel or an O vowel. A vowel's on top, O vowel's on the bottom. Okay, we'll look at, so that's really covering all the strong verbs. That's pretty simple. Now we're going to the weak verbs. And the weak verbs are going to be a lot of the same kind of thing we've been looking at on other weak verbs. So we need to become familiar with these. The goal is recognition. We might be able to recognize what the words are, that they're imperatives. The same types of things we've looked at all along. Gutturals cannot take vocal schwas. So we have katol. That's our imperative example here. And we have a vocal schwa. And so if we get a different word like Kazakh, we have a comet, a chet rather, we have a chet on the first letter. It can't take a vocal schwa. And so it goes to a reduced patak. And so that changes, but this means kill. This means seize or be strong. It could be either one. Be strong, or it can also mean to seize. Okay, so gutturals cannot take vocal schwas. Sometimes vowels will be different. And so we have katol and kazakh. We can see that the vowels are different, as well as the schwa thing. And then letters may drop out. One yods, some one noons, but not all one noons. Noons will drop out sometimes. I mean, if they don't drop out, that's not hard because, it's right there. And then the geminates may drop out letters also. Suffirmatives remain the same. So what we've memorized with the imperfect, it still carries over here. We're just going to take the preformatives off, and it's only going to second person. only, always, second person. So let's look at the three het ayin imperatives. All volitional forms are based on the imperfect verbs. And so here's our imperfects for shalach, to send, and this is the 2ms, 3ms, I'm sorry, 3, I am messed up here. 2ms, 2fs, 2mp, 2fp. That's what we have here. These are the imperfects. We still have all of our preformatives there. So you will send to a man, you will send to a woman, you all will send, and to women, you all will send. Okay. So the things that change, vowels will change. Gutturals prefer a vowel. So we have the patak there on a couple of them. We're going to remove the preformatives to turn them from imperfects into imperatives. Now, we get to the second one. The first one is there's no trouble. We have shlach. Shlach, that's an imperative. You can just draw a little exclamation point. Do it. Send. Send. But now we have a shvafite on the 2fs. So it's going to turn into a hirik. We saw that earlier. And so no problem now. And when we get to 2mp, same thing. We have two shvas. We have shvafite. It's going to turn into a hirik. So now it's no problem. And then we remove the last preformative. And so there's our imperatives forms. Okay, another example. Here's a 3 aleph. Let's see, I think that was all on that one. So 3 alephs. We know that when an aleph quiesces, that it'll lengthen vowels. We know the gutturals prefer a vowels. The aleph is quiescent, so the previous vowel lengthens. Okay. The second and third feminine plural imperatives often have an E vowel, E stem vowel. But again, we're going to take all the preformatives, we're going to drop them off. And we have two shvafites, and so they're going to change to hiriks. And it's just that easy. Okay. Now we're going to look at two guttural imperatives. In some weak verbs, when the performative is removed, the first vowel will change. So we have techazak. We remove the preformative and it just becomes chazak. What happened? The reduced segol changed. Usually this first vowel, when it changes to a reduced vowel, it'll reflect the next vowel. And we've seen that before too. So the vowel will change. So here's a two guttural choose. You choose, man, you choose, woman, you all choose, men, you all choose, women, you all will choose. And now we're going to change them into, these are imperfects, and we're going to change them into imperatives. So we're going to remove the preformatives. And we did gain a dogesh there, but really not much else changed. We got a shvafite. Even though it's reduced, it's still like, this still behaves a little bit like a shva. And so we're going to have to have an adjustment made to the vowel, and it becomes a patak, and it also gains the dogesh. The first two vowels correspond. We have the vowel here, so this is going to correspond to it. We've seen that before. Next one, we've got the same situation. We drop the preformative, and the same thing happens. It mirrors the patak, so we get that patak under the reduced patak. So we get the patak under the first letter, and there's no problem with the last one. We just get the dogesh. So not a lot of changes there for the two guttural. So now one guttural imperatives. So here's Kazakh again. You will be strong. Well, it's always you here. So it's going to be you masculine, you feminine, you all masculine, you all feminine. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing. We've done two. And notice that we see the sigil here, um, and down here too. We see that mirrored. Okay. So we're going to remove the preformatives to make imperatives out of them. And I'm removing some of my scribbling here so you can see what's happening on the screen here. So the first two vowels are going to correspond, so it changes from a sigil to a reduced patak. We remove another preformative, and again, it has a schwa fight, so it turns to a heuric. Then we have the next one, we're going to remove it, and the first vowel is going to turn to a heuric again. And then the last one, we have the same kind of transformation to a reduced patak. So just some vowel changes, but the rest of the form, when it comes to things like the sufformative on all of these, that doesn't change. Okay, here's an example we can look at. Okay, I've got this coming up here. And okay, so here's and now, ta, and now zak. There's our imperative. Be strong, Zerubbabel, a declaration of Yahweh. And be strong, Joshua, son of Jehozadak, the priest, the great one. So it'll be the high priest. And be strong, all the people of the land, a declaration of Yahweh. And do, because I am with you, a declaration of Yahweh of hosts. So we have imperative, imperative, imperative. So now you've seen it in action. Okay, again, all volitional forms are based on the imperfect verbs. Here we have one aleph. We're looking at one aleph. And we have the same kind of things going on. The first two vowels correspond. You can see two segol, one's a reduced segol, two pataks. And the same is repeated below too. So we're going to take the preformatives off to make imperatives out of them. And there you have it. I mean, that's nothing, not a big deal there. That's pretty easy. Just remove the preformatives. There's two types of one-alephs for Qal imperfect verbs. So te'esor, we have a segol and a reduced segol, and then we have tomar, we have the holum, and then if for amar, this is like you will say is behaves a little bit differently. And we looked at the different types of one-alephs when we were looking at the imperfects. But when you remove the preformatives, they look the same in the imperative. Esor and emor. So that's not too hard either. Okay, we're still looking at things based on the imperative paradigm. Now we're looking at three hays. Three hay verbs are really three yod verbs. There's tivnei, that's you will build. And you will build, talking to a woman, you all will build, and to men, and you all will build, speaking to women. All right. So the segol hay is an ending. We looked at that probably just 2 weeks ago, I think we looked at that. But we're going to remove the preformatives to make imperatives, tell them to build, tell somebody to build. So we remove it, and so then it changes from a segol hay to a tsere hay. And we're going to remove the next preformative and the next preformative. And then when we remove the last preformative, we have yet another change that's going to reduce. Or no, I'm thinking of something else. Okay, so that's all. We just remove the preformatives. Okay, the second and third consonants of geminates are identical. And that's why we call them Geminids, twins, because this is saviv. So the word actually has another bait. That would be your root right there. So it's just surround, but we don't have that. The one drops out. Okay. So again, we have the imperfects here. We want to turn them into instead of saying you will surround, we want to say surround, exclamation point. So we're going to remove the preformatives. And that's it. No, okay, this is the one where we get the 2FP is shortened. We're going to move that yod out. So that is a change that happens. That's the one I was expecting earlier and I didn't have it. That's a Gemini. Okay. So that's the only peculiarity to it. And looking at one noons now, imperatives with the one noon. The noons usually drop out and it's replaced with a dagesh forte. We've seen this over and again. Here's nafal, he fell. Well, the noon falls out, and when we put the tav preformative on, and then when we do the imperative, sometimes the noon reappears. How about that? Wasn't that fun? The noon reappears in some imperatives. So this is you will fall. This is saying fall! Exclamation point. Fall. I'm going to remove this because we have more stuff coming on here. Okay. So in some one noons, the noon will reappear, but it doesn't happen all the time. Here's nasa. Nasa means to pull out, like you're going to break camp or something. You will pull out, and we're going to make it an imperative. We remove the preformative, and all we end up with is saw, with the noon does not come back. So sometimes the noon come back, sometimes it doesn't. Some verbs. Okay, one yods. Yods also will drop out. So we have yashav. That means he will dwell, or he dwelt. He dwelt. We're going to have the preformative to make it a he will dwell. The yod drops out. We get a sere as a compensatory lengthening. When this, so sometimes yod drops out, but here's tirash. Tirash is you will possess or you will dispossess. And this time the yod is not going to drop out. So to make it into an imperative, we end up with shave and rosh. The preformative drops off. That's all that happens here. That's the same. And even though in the imperfect we still have this yod, which is part of the root, when it comes to the imperative, we don't have either of them. Neither of them have a yod. He drops out of both the imperative. So that's a little bit of difference too. Biconsonantal, this would be hollow or two vav yod roots. So they're similar to strong verbs. The biconsonant imperatives just drop the imperfect preformatives is all. So takum, you will arise, just becomes kum, arise, exclamation point. Takum mena, and we just lose the preformative. And this one also shortens. Let's go back and look at that again. And so for the tooth FP, it shortens that, takes that yod back out. We saw that earlier too, just like in the Geminids. Okay, one noons. Natan is a one noon verb, but it has a sere stem, vowel in the imperfect and the imperative. So here, Natan, he gave. The noon drops out when we add the preformative to it, so it becomes titain, you will give. But for the imperative, you drop that preformative and just tain. Tain is give, exclamation point. It's now an imperative. And here's titena. We're going to drop the preformative, and it's still Natan. That second noon is the noon that would normally be here, is now in this dagesh. The 2FP 3 noon assimilates into the subformative noun. Okay, lakak, that's another odd one because it behaves like a one noon verb. We've looked at this before. There's lakak. We put the preformative on it. So now it's you will take, but the preformative comes off. Hak, take, exclamation point. Man. For feminine, the llama drops out again, and the preformative falls off. This is all very predictable, knowing that lakak behaves like a one noon. And lakak is the only one lamed verb that drops its lamed. It's unique in that. Halak is the other unique one. It's the only one hay that drops out. So for halak imperatives, it inflects like the one yod verbs. So whenever you add the preformative, the hay drops out. So, and then when it does, you get the lengthening of the vowel, you end up with the tsere, and then when the preformative goes away, you have lake. So it means walk or come or go or something like that. So you could be you will walk and you will walk and becomes walk, exclamation point. Telling somebody to do it. Halak. This would be for the plural. Lachu. Okay, you're just missing the preformative again, and the llama drops out. I'm sorry, the hay drops out. And halak is the only one hay that drops its hay. All right, how to say do not in Hebrew? Do not is a negative command. A negative command is not going to use an imperative. A negative command is going to use the imperfect. So lo pikto, not you will kill. You shall not kill. We'll talk about that in a minute. That's what the little star there is for. Lo is used for absolute or permanent prohibitions on page 160. You can see that. And then the other alternative to that is all, pikto, not you will kill. So do not kill. The all is used for immediate, specific, or non-durative prohibitions. Now, just to not to confuse anybody, that is not what it says in the Ten Commandments. Tiktol is a generic killing. The Ten Commandments, Exodus 20:13, it says lo tirtsak, lo tirtsak. This means do not murder. This is just killing in general. So this is not the 10. This is just an example. That's not what the Ten Commandments say. This is what the Ten Commandments says. Okay, so how to say please in Hebrew? Please is na. So if Lonnie says, could we go out to eat? And I say, nah. Am I saying no, I don't want to? Or am I saying please, can we go out to eat? Na is please. Like you've seen this many, many times. Every time you've seen what we say is Hosanna, Hoshiana, that na is please. Save, please, or save now. So that na is please. So katol na, kill please, or please kill. Turn it around. And then katol na, please kill. Notice that this is a comet satuf. These are pronounced exactly the same way. Katol na, katol na. So it still means please kill. Kill please. So na means please. It can also mean now. Like I said, Hoshiana, Hosanna, Hosanna. Save please, save now. Either one could be used. And oftentimes it's used sometimes in like in prayer or in sometimes God is actually doing the talking and asking somebody to do something. It sounds like he's being polite and saying please. And so often it's not translated in some English translations, and probably most English translations. we're not going to do that. We're going to translate it every time we see it in this class. But just that'll be one of the things you see as you start reading through the Hebrew scriptures. You're going to see that a lot of translations will leave that out sometimes, but we're not going to. Okay, so that's how you say please. Then we're going to look at how to translate imperatives. We're just going to look at, and also negative commands. We're going to look at both of those. So here's a feminine imperative. There's nothing on the front. This is where the tav would be, but it's not there. So say, please, sister of me, you. So please say you're my sister. And then keep the soul of you, or keep your life, guard your life. Seek good. It's pretty straightforward. This would be you all, because if this had the tav on the front, that'd be you all will seek good. But we don't have the tav performative, but everything else is there. So seek good. And here's a negative with all. Not please, you will pass over from with the servant of you. Please not pass by your servant. Not you will send. Not this still has it. That's not an imperative. Not you will send, because when you're doing a negative command, it's going to use an imperfect, not an imperative. Not you will send the hand of you to the boy, to the young man. And not you will do to him anything. Ma'uma. Ma'uma. Anything. All right, vocabulary. Let's go with vocabulary. Page 203. We looked at this word earlier in the lesson, bachar. Bachar, to choose. Bean is to understand. Darash is to seek. We had that in a slide earlier too. Darash is to seek. Harag is to kill. That's actually more of a murder type thing too. That's not a generic kill. There's a different word. Chafetz is to delight. Kadash is to be holy. And depending upon how it's being used, it could be to make something holy or cause something to be holy. So it's going to be consecrate or dedicate or something like that, or even to declare holy. Ra'ah is to pasture or to feed. Sha'al is to ask. And Baal is that's the name of a idol, but it's also means, probably the reason why it's the name of the idol is because one of the meanings is master, but it's also an owner of something. Like one of the funny ones, I think, is when they find Elijah and the king asks, what did the man look like? He said, well, he was a hairy man. And in Hebrew, it says he's the master of hair, or he's an owner of hair. It's just kind of funny. And even for a husband, if that's used for a husband. Shevet can be either a staff, or it can be referring to a tribe, one of the tribes of Israel. Shalom, I think you probably know what that one is. It's peace, but it also has to do with welfare. Because if you remember when we were talking about Ma Shalomcha, what's your peace? Really, you're asking somebody, how are you doing? So sometimes in the scriptures, somebody will meet somebody or send messengers to somebody, and they will ask about their peace. And basically, it's just asking about their welfare, how they've been. So that's a biblical use as well. And then we have ba'ad, which means behind or through. It's a preposition. Ya'an, on account of. And there's na, which would be please or now. Any questions? Okay, then work on chapter 18 vocabulary, work on your exercise and your 18 and the workbook, and go ahead and read chapter 19 for next week. So I'll ask again, any questions? All right, then we'll be done.